Okay. So while you are doing that, let me just, for those who have joined us, and thank you for joining us. So we are trying to invite Senka Holt, who just wrote a book about values. It's called Be You. And I can't wait for all of us. I mean, we've heard some of that, Terry and I, because we spoke to her before. But we can't wait to for her to share her research into values and the process of how do we uncover them and why they are so important. Because, you know, Terry and I, we are definitely very, very keen on values, and we know why that is key for everything in life. I see science to well-being.
Yes,
Joy.
that's
Okay,
Senka.
Yeah.
And so, okay, here we go. Now
Okay,
I think
good.
I can invite her.
Right.
Okay, that was a strange process, but.
Yeah, something has changed, because even when you invited me, it hasn't been the same. Okay,
No.
we have three-way.
There we are.
Fabulous.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Happy New Year, Senka.
Thank you so much. Happy New Year to you as well. And thank you for inviting me to be your guest today.
We could not wait. I was so excited. So we have Senka Holzer here, and she is sitting in Austria at the moment. I've got myself in Switzerland, and we've got Sanella in the UK. So we've got like a 3-point triangulation of people who want to talk about values and core values. So that's great. I just want to take a moment, Senka, before we introduce you, to just welcome everybody who's joining in on the live. I see them joining in. If you all have questions, to those listening in, about values or something you've always been wondering about values, go ahead and feel free to type it in the comments, and hopefully, you know, maybe we can get to some of those questions if you have them. But first, I want to do a little introduction to tell the people listening about you, Senka. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to read a little bit of your bio plus some words I added. So Senka's background is actually in biochemistry, believe it or not. So I was a biology major, so it's fine. We all take really unique paths in our lives, right? And she has a PhD in molecular medicine. She's the author of the book Be You that we were referencing before. It's coming out either at the end of this month or the beginning of February. We realized depending on location, it releases in different dates. She's also a coach trainer at Science to Wellbeing, which is an organization that combines science and coaching to get successful change with clients. She's committed to turning hard science into a deeply intuitive and empathetic model for self-transformation and fulfillment, which I think is just a beautiful goal to have. And this next part, which is why we reached out to Senka, in 2015, she led an experimental study of life values and how values-based coaching can change levels of well-being and stress. While training coaches from around the globe, Senka discovered remarkable patterns about how people with high levels of well-being think, act, and communicate about their values. Thank you so much, Senka, for being with us.
Well, thank you for the beautiful introduction, and thank you for having me here. I'm always happy and motivated to talk about values.
I know that, and so we feel like we've met one of our kin sisters here in that. Sanella and I use values a lot in our coaching work. You know, being certified in the work of Brené Brown, Brené has core values in every one of her curriculum. So it's something that I've really grown to appreciate. Now, you talk about core values as being, you call it our psychological DNA, which I love that phrase. So, you know, we have our own reasons for using them with our clients, but can you tell me, like in your own words, why do you think it's important for people to identify their core values?
Yeah, thank you. So I get this question a lot. It's very important, right? So I like metaphors, so I might be use quite a few of them during this conversation today. So for me, because we know how important values are for reaching great levels of well-being in life, trying to achieve those great levels of well-being without knowing what our core values are is like going to shoot the target with your eyes closed.
Ah, great analogy.
And then on the other hand, when you know what your core values are, it's like seeing this beautiful target in front of you, where you're increasing your chances at hitting it and getting these better levels of well-being. But also a warning there, just because you see it, that's not going to mean that you're going to hit every single time. Well, I don't think so, but that's not the point also. The point is that we increase our chances in following the life that we really are meant to live, that is an expression of our true nature, and by that, increasing the levels of well-being.
Oh, that is so beautiful. That is beautiful. And I love that right from the start, you are saying how important and how beautiful it is to have them, and how that gives us and connects us to our purpose. But at the same time, bringing the reality check of knowing them doesn't just magically makes it, happen, and it's sort of that we can do that all the time. So yeah, that is really, really important to hold that dichotomy.
Yeah, it speaks a little bit to the authenticity that so many of our coaching clients are seeking.
Yeah.
Right. So I picture this target as, I just want to be authentic. I want to be my true self. And that target is their true self. And how do we get there? How do we get to that expression? And so I guess first knowing that there's a target and what that target is the first step.
I love that. Yes, the target as authenticity. I totally see it like that. When we find the way to our authenticity, then we're definitely increasing the chances of having a good and deeply fulfilled life.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. And Singa, you have this, you talk about knowing your core values, and you distinguish between core values and the acquired values. So can you maybe define a little bit about core values? I mean, you spoke a bit about it, but can you sort of talk to each as a group, and then tell us what is the difference, and why is it important to even notice the difference?
Oh yeah, my favorite question. So when we started studying the value systems and how they correlate to the levels of well-being, one of the first things that we noticed is that we operate on two completely different systems of values. So the first system is something that we already touched as we were talking about authenticity, and this target are the core values. And this is really our intrinsic, inherent values, what is most important to us. I like to say this is what our nature is telling us what we need to thrive. This is how I see the core values, something that we're naturally driven to, something that is the expression of our true inner core self. And when we are in alignment with those values, then we thrive. We feel that our life is meaningful and purposeful. And then on the other hand, things get complicated because along the way, from all the different sources where we grow up and then when we work later and so on, we adopt values along the way. And I call those values acquired values. And if we go back to this first definition of the core values, so they are what our nature says what we need to thrive. Acquired values would be what our environment is saying what we need to thrive. So all those advices from first our family and close friends, and then school and media and social media organizations where we work and so on, where we volunteer and so on, they imprint their messages of their values into our value system, and then we end up having our own value system built on two completely different sets of values. And why does that matter? I also get this question a lot. For me, it's so obvious because I do research on it, but I understand that many people are confused. Why do we need to distinguish and to know those values? Well, because the core values, because they're so inherent and innate to us, they bring us this natural feeling of dissatisfaction, which accumulates over time. This is the lasting satisfaction. And every time when we align ourselves with the core values, we add on to our existing well-being. On the other hand, acquired values bring us really short types of happiness. And then they're very intense. The moment when we achieve something that is in alignment with our acquired values, we feel like, great, oh yeah, it's very intensive feeling. Yes, I made it. But then it quickly fades away, this good feeling. And we end up having the life of, as I like to call it, peaks and valleys, instead of always building up on our existing levels of well-being.
Oh,
that is brilliant.
I love how you're able to differentiate like how the experience of fulfilling each of those values feels to somebody, because sure, they an acquired value, something that our family has told us is worthy of valuing, or our culture or our environment around us has over time, we feel like, oh yeah, you almost get that hit of like belonging. I'm keeping the kind of social contract in place by adhering to this value. And so there's maybe this immediate peak of like, yeah, good. I've got it. I'm still kind of with the tribe. But when I talk to my clients, they're really looking for a sense of satisfaction in their life. And I do core values for exactly the reason you talked about, which is to try to reduce the friction, right? Because sometimes people have things that are inherently, they value, are important to them, but the way they're living their life is not aligned, right? The way they're acting or living is not aligned with something that's innate to them, and they feel this friction. And if you can kind of shine a light on that, you can reduce that friction. They can start feeling like this overall sense of satisfaction. And I think that's what you're talking about when you hit on the core values versus maybe an acquired value, which has more kind of quick rewards, but suddenly kind of leaves the satisfaction, sort of leaves you just as quickly.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that I want to add is I don't want to that somebody misinterprets these acquired values as something bad per se. They're not bad per se. All those values that we acquired along the way, they have an important message to us. Somebody is trying to help us, especially our family and our environment. They want what's best for us. They want to help us. But then it does not necessarily always work as great in our life, especially if we start over focusing on those values. The problem with acquired values is that they require time and energy on our end. And sometimes if we are too focused on acquired values, we are left with too little time and energy for fulfilling our core values. And this is where the friction is coming at. So they're not bad per se, but then in combination, if they take too much of our time and energy, then we are experiencing lower levels of well-being.
I see.
And I think that's was what's interesting to me as a parent. Obviously I bring, my husband, we have a set of values that we are bringing into our family system. And I know as a kid, you do not necessarily, well, I did not feel any friction until a point. I think there's a, I immediately go to my clients to like, when do you feel the need to question whether something that you have acquired is yours or not? And I think there needs to be some friction, something that is kind of like what I have taken on is no longer, I'm not in a groove with it. I'm not kind of thriving with it. And I think that is probably, in my experience, that's probably when we are called to examine them and maybe, put them kind of say, you served me, that's okay. But, maybe I value that, but not in the same fashion as I have been taught or I have been given. So it's an interesting point of need to separate them and kind of have that debate for yourself.
Yeah, and you're totally right. I think as we grow up and as we take on more responsibility, first the working responsibility, then the family responsibility, then we start lacking time for everything. When we are young, when we're in school, when we're studying, we do dedicate a great deal to acquired values, but we always have enough time to dedicate to the core values, to hobbies, to whatever really sparks us. But as we grow up, as we go to work, as we have families on our own, then time is becoming precious. And then in this situation where we have less and less time, then we start seeing it. Oh, my job needs to be aligned better with my core values. Otherwise, if it takes 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day of my working of my time, then I won't have any time left to fulfill my core values. And this is where the friction starts in my experience. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule, but I think when we start like really having a serious career and maybe a family on our own or both, then we start seeing the importance of understanding this and building our working life and our private lives around our core values.
Yeah. And oh my God, I have like now a million questions to ask you. I'm going to just add one in, which is it likely, right, that when we're younger, we don't know exactly who we are yet? I mean, I don't know. I'm in my 50s. I don't know exactly who I am. Still trying to find that out. But I think when you're younger, right, you haven't fully come into your own. You haven't fully figured out who you are yet. And you've really probably oriented, depending on your circumstances, a great deal towards acquired values. You know, I am what my family is. I am what my neighborhood is. I am what my ethnicity is. Whatever they value, I value. We just sort of kind of assume that that's what we're supposed to be doing, and then you get to that point where, you know, in the teenage years and 20s, where people start differentiating and pulling apart. And so, is it fair to say that probably the first part of our life, those first 20 years or so, we're really driven mostly by acquired values? And that you would have to be a certain age before you can really identify core values?
Such a great question. Such a great question. We're going deeper and deeper here. So that's true that most of our, let's say, the beginning of our life, we spend with acquired values because we are trying to see what's going on and then to mimic that in our own lives. But the key to understanding our core values once when we're older and when we go through the process and coaching and everything, the key is looking back and seeing what are the things that we've always seen. What are the things that we can remember about ourselves that were there when we were kids, when we were in kindergarten and school, and that we cannot help but be? So I can give you my own example. You know, it took me years or decades, fair enough to say, to understand that my top core value is motivation. So motivating others is something that really gives me this feeling of joy without having the need to have a recognition or reward or any. It's a reward on its own when I manage to improve a mood of someone else. And then I identified, and I was like, oh yeah, that's it for me. But then when I looked back in my life, I figured that this was true for me since I was a child. And I was never driven to that by my environment. Actually, many times I heard that, oh, don't try to help always everyone. People will use you. Your friends are going to use you. So it was not always promoted. It was even, I wouldn't say punished, but like negatively, it was negatively talked about or even critiqued sometimes, but it's something that I could not help myself but be. When I see somebody like lacking motivation, I would be naturally driven to that person and start restoring that. And I did that. I can remember situations even from kindergarten when I did that. And this is something that I experienced with working with clients, you know. Yes, we are aware of that later in life, but then reflecting on, we see how that was important to us all the way along. So I can another practical example that's a really different one, but comes to mind is a client that had the core value of adventure, top core value, and they were always taught how that's scary and how they shouldn't try so many different things and how they be really hurt and so on when they were young, and then they kind of separated a little bit from this adventure. But then when they came, like, grow up and had space to do it, it was like a magnet, you know, again driven and rediscovering this true nature of us. So it has been there, and I really think it's part of our nature as since the moment we enter this world, and then we get confused because we do not have system that help us understand what our core values are, right? Because our current system of education and parenting is, kids, they don't know anything and we have to teach them everything. They're born into this world without any moral compass, values, or anything, and we have to teach them everything. And I think that's not entirely true. We have to teach them a great deal of things, but they have their own nature and they have their own core values, which I like to call psychological DNA. They came into this world with that, and we see that by really when clients discover what their core values are, they can remember these really, really situations from a long time ago when they were super young.
Okay. So actually, clues to our core values are found in our very early years, because they are maybe even if we didn't know who we were, they are maybe the truest expression of us before we knew who we were supposed to be instead.
Oh, I love this. Yes, I think so.
Okay, one more question from me. Can values be aspirational? And by that I mean, you know, a lot of my clients will ask me, can I pick a core value? It's not something that I'm currently living, but something I like and I want to be living. And I'm never sure how to follow that, because of course I want to encourage my clients to kind of live into something that they want to grow into. But is that a core value of theirs? Can it be aspirational?
It could be. I would say there are two different scenarios when I encounter this situation that somebody says, oh, this is something I really, really love, but I never get to this. I never have time, or whatever is in my way, I don't get to live this value. So there are two different situations normally that we discover then through this process. So the first one is that it could be our core values, but then there are so many acquired values blocking our way, like with all the shoulds. You should do this, you have to do this, you have to achieve this, and so on, that we simply don't have time and energy to pursue this core value. And then the other possible scenario is that this is actually our acquired value, something that we strongly believe we should, but it was just never really such a strong core value of ours to spark this motivation to pursue it. I can give you an example for that. Let's say we talk about the value equality. Let's take that one as an example. So we say it's really super important to us, but then when we look at our schedule, there's nothing that we do to support this value. There's no social justice commitment on our end. There's nothing that we actually do. So then we can look at our schedule and say, okay, maybe we believe there are so many other things to achieve before those acquired values, so that we don't find time in our schedule, or it's just simply we think we should value that, but it's not really so. It's this deep gut feeling that is prompting us ever to action. It's not sparking the action. So those are the two different scenarios that we like really often encounter when we talk about that.
Oh gosh, I love that. I mean, there are so many things, those shoulds, like, you know, we do have, I mean, even when how we acquired all these values, like, you know, we are so not just in our family, that we are constantly exposed to how we should be and who should we aspire to be at different age as well. So we are kind of magnets to that, and you know, we still, you know, even I think we just do that throughout our lives. So what's interesting there is, to me, because I appreciate that sometimes we value something and maybe there is a gap, like, you know, we are just not living it. It's important to us, and just the kind of the process of identifying and voicing and getting in touch, you know, that really is something that I care about. But I look at my life and I'm not expressing it in any way, and now it's like, okay, yeah, that's going to change. So is the way to or what would be your way of helping somebody figure out, is this something that is this the old should that I've never managed to, you know, live up to? Or is this something that's, you know, it's my core, but I never managed to nurture and let flourish, if you like?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So when we talk about core and acquired values, this is the first step of the process. You know, identifying the values that are actually in charge of our lives, that are driving our actions and behaviors and thoughts and emotions. And when we identify those values and see that we are really aligning a great deal of our actions and behaviors and thinking and everything we do to these values, then it's time to see whether they're core or acquired. It's something that we really deeply want and is really core to us, or it's something that is part of those programs, those shows. And we have created a couple of different questions that are helping us. So when we identify a specific value, we go through a set of 7 questions, which then create what we call the value score. The better the score, the more the core value, the worse the score, the more chances this is an acquired value of us. And I can give you some example of those questions. So a very easy one would be, does pursuing this value brings you energy or takes your energy away? You know, and I'm not thinking on a short term. I'm thinking like long term, because when I think about motivating others, you know, sometimes you're really tired, or sometimes you would just skip somebody's problem and so on. And at that moment, maybe it doesn't feel great, but then on the long run, looking back to it, you're so happy and you're fulfilled. And when you see their mood improve, this gives me this great feeling and restores back my energy, right? And when we are just pursuing our acquired values, it's most of the time just investment on energy, and this really short spikes of return or reward, which is really never a match. So we call that expectation reality gap. What is happening then to us?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then another one, a little bit more complicated, but like really easy. It's nice to imagine the whole situation. So through this question, so what we like to say, okay, you have this one value of yours, and you want to see whether this value is core or acquired. So imagine that you're in the city hall and you're going to the balcony, and there are all the citizens of where you live, including all your relatives, friends, colleagues, family members, everyone. And they have in front of themselves a big list of all the possible values that you can have. And now you're about to say, okay, this is my top value. So are you going to be anxious about it? Or are you really going to be very natural and proud about it? So this is also an indicator. Or the other way around. You go there and then they have all the lists, and then you have this one particular value. Would you be feeling guilty or ashamed not saying that this is your value? This is also
So meaning
part of,
that, are they expecting to hear
yeah,
a specific
exactly.
value from you
Yeah.
because it's what we value as a society here?
Yeah. a typical example that we see, for example, is family, right? We should value family, right? And then you come and then they're all waiting, and then you see the family and it was not on your list, and you might be like, oh, it really should be. So let's just quickly change it and put that. So those are an example, you know, where you go back to your emotions and see how you feel about it. Okay with it, guilty, ashamed, proud, and then these are the indicators how these values interfere with our emotions and behaviors in our life at the end.
Yeah, I love that. It's almost like, you know, am I putting that on my list because I think that you think I should have it on my list?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
no, I can see that. Okay, fabulous. One more?
Yeah. I liked that sensing into how you would feel declaring it to certain people as your value. I think that's really insightful. You know, I think what I really am growing to appreciate very, very much from your work, Senka, is one, I think we've appreciated how hard it is for people to identify their core values. Every time we do this exercise, it is really tough. And now I'm understanding at a deeper level why, the complexity of it. I have a beginner sense of how to help them differentiate. So I've already pre-ordered your book. So I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm just appreciating the process, the conversation that you really need to be in with somebody for a longer period of time, looking at actions, behaviors, choices, emotions, feelings around these things that they're declaring. Really just much more robust than, sort of just picking a word off of a piece of paper, which is very, very difficult. So I'm so grateful for you shining a light on that. Final question. And so look, anybody who's listening, this is your last chance to type in a question for Senka. So we're just pre-warning because we're going to be wrapping up shortly. Our community, our audience, most of the people listening in tonight are parents. We're parents, and we know you're a mom of two. I'm curious, how does knowing your core values help you in your parenting?
Yes, thank you. A great question. So, I would say knowing both is important, not only my core values, but even more maybe in parenting, my acquired values, because they're the loud ones, the shoot ones, and the ones that are really often like raising their ugly head and telling me, making me being this parent whose kids wants them, like, is not really happy the way they reacted or something. But then I go back and ask myself, hey, which value is here in play? Is this my core value, my acquired value? If it's my acquired value, is this really helpful for my kids or not? Is this whose agenda is this at the end of the day?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, because I don't think when I remember my childhood and my relationship with my parents, I would say even if I didn't share their core values, I never had problems with their core values because I could see that this sparks the life in them. I could see that this is something that they're always more motivated and more happy and more energized when they follow. So even if this was not my core value, I never had issues with that. On the other hand, the acquired values, those are the ones that were always somehow connected to judgment. And this is where I didn't feel like always great, I would say, because it was really external and there was a lot of judgment within and outside. And I would say there we have to be even more mindful about our acquired value when we're dealing with kids. But I have to make here a statement that my kids are really young. So we'll see how this process helps me in like 25 years from now, probably the best.
We'll have you back on. We'll have you back on. I can only imagine also, we bring two households together with two parents or guardians or whoever's helping to raise these kids of ours. And maybe you're bringing two cultures together, maybe not. but you're certainly bringing two households together. And it's just, fascinating to think, wow, what are the possible acquired values that are raising their ugly head, from my side, and it may or may not be aligned. And like you, with my husband's, and you imagine that these things are at odds, and if they're at odds internally to the family, plus they're the shoulds that are really feeling like I'm asking you to do this not because of me and I'm deeply committed to it, but I'm asking you to do it because our family, our culture thinks, other people think we should, right? It has that feeling attached to it. Yeah, I can imagine how much that's showing up in our households.
Yeah.
Yep. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
So, yeah, things get really interesting when you have a multicultural household, and there is a lot of situations where you can actually learn a lot about your programs, your own acquired values that are coming from your culture. Because when we are in the culture where we are born to, we don't have a chance to recognize those values, right? Everybody are acting like that. Everybody are valuing the same thing. But then when we are confronted with with people who were raised in a completely different value system, then we are like, oh, whoa, what's going on? Why they don't like me? And then we start extracting these programs and understand that they're actually just our acquired values.
Yeah, and I think what for me, what's just that aspect of our conversation, how important it is really to have that conversation, and how easy, I mean, simple, not easy maybe, is to actually even just get together and be curious, so that I can tell you, I can at first figure it out for myself. These are my values, and you can tell me yours, and we can sort of, I think in that exchange, we can understand each other so much better, and we can understand why, I did recently with my husband, and it's like, oh, this is why we are kind of clashing on that one. And I think it's a fabulous way to kind of ground each other in reality, what's important and what drives us, rather than sort of go into that, oh, you are different and therefore wrong, which we also can easily go into.
A really great point. And one thing to really be mindful when we have those conversations is, like, most of the time we're having a conversation on level of behaviors, right? And we're assuming the specific behaviors are attached to the same values in our partner's value system as for us. And this is like so wrong, because then we enter this so-called clash without any real good reasons. But if we find a way to understand the behaviors on the level of values, chances are we're going to find an agreement really, really quickly and fast. Maybe not agreement, but understanding for each other.
Oh, that's beautiful, right? That's so beautiful. Thank you for leaving us with that insight, Senka. I just, I want to thank you so much for being with us, for being in conversation with us around something that we love and thought we understood and are learning now at a whole nother level. And so you really brought that to us, and I'm so happy I happened upon your work. I've already, like I said, pre-ordered your book, Be You, coming out at the, oh, you already got a copy.
I have some connections, so I managed to get my copy earlier.
I imagine. But we will put all the information about how they can contact you in Science to Wellbeing, and how people can pre-order your book on Amazon, coming out at the end of this month or the beginning of February, depending on location. Any parting words you want to leave us with in terms of values, Senka?
I think we covered really a great deal of topics around values, but what I really want is to thank you for having me here with you and having this great conversation and giving me a chance to align myself with my core values for the past 30 to 40 minutes. So I really a deep thank you to both of you.
Thank you also.
Thank
And
you.
we will hold the conversation closely in our hearts, and we'll stay in touch. We look forward to speaking with you more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All right.
Senka.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone who
everybody, for
joined
joining.
us.
Have a wonderful evening. Back to your families. Live your values.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.